Mochi Health is here to help you start your weight loss journey with caring, personalized support. Meet one-on-one with board-certified obesity doctors and registered dietitians who truly listen and understand your unique needs. Eligible patients can access affordable GLP-1 medications delivered right to their door each month. No insurance? No problem. Mochi Health accepts FSA and HSA, making care accessible and affordable. And with 24/7 customer service, you'll never feel alone on your path to better health. Get started with Mochi Health today. Take the free quiz at joinmochi.com and use code AUDIO40 at checkout for $40 off your first month of membership. That's joinmochi.com with promo code AUDIO40.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 207 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, what's going on with you?
What's happening with you?
I'm doing great, man. Yeah. The weather's nice.
It is.
We're able to get out. I mowed my grass for the first time.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That was actually kind of fun.
I watched the guy mow my grass.
Did you?
Yeah. It looked pretty fun, too.
Wiping the sweat off his brow as you were drinking a cold one?
I was. I felt kind of bad.
Yeah.
Not that bad, though.
No, not too bad.
I mean, that's why we pay the rent I pay at the place I stay at.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
It's all included.
It's all right.
We continue to see some great support. We got to give our shout outs. We had Dame G.
What's going on, Dame?
Jade.
What's up, Jade?
Brian Huffman.
Hey, Brian.
Dominique Hobden.
What's going on, Dominique?
Baby Boxer Mom.
Oh, got me some baby boxes.
Kristen Grove.
Hey, Kristen.
Alexandria Moore.
Hey, Alexandria.
Sherry Eakley.
Hey, thank you, Eakley.
Leaky Vanima.
Well, go see a doctor right away, please.
Peggy Timpani.
Hey, Peggy.
Amy Basil.
What's going on, Basil?
Letha.
Hey, Letha.
Mark Kelly.
What's up, MK?
Stacy Maxwell.
Hey, Stacy.
Abigail Odette.
Hey, Abigail.
Sarah Solomon.
Hi, Sarah.
Taylor Villanueva.
Villanueva.
Yeah, Caitlin.
Hey, Caitlin.
Hannah Lenora.
Hey, Lenora.
Alicia Di Pasquale.
Ooh, Di Pasquale.
Rick Hilmer.
What's going on, Rick?
Bonnie Farrell.
Hey, Bonnie.
And last but not least, Deborah Dykes.
Well, thank you, Deborah.
So thank you for all that new support. And then if we go back into the vault, Gibbs, this week we selected Badger Ferret.
Hey, Badger.
So we appreciate the new support on Patreon, the continued support. We had some great PayPal donations as well from Joanna Rossiter.
Hey, Joanna.
Eva's Nature Therapy.
Well, like some therapy.
Catherine Alley.
Hey, Alley.
And Christine Krause.
Well, thank you, Krause.
So thanks to all of you as well. Gibbs, right now on True Crime All the Time, we have an episode out on Margot Freshwater. This is a case that I was not familiar with. I had fun researching it. I know you did too.
Sure.
Margot was a teen, ended up being charged and convicted of murder in the late 1960s. But then she escaped from a women's prison and essentially lived her life crime-free for the next 32 years.
Yeah. How amazing is that?
Yeah, until they caught up with her. So it's an interesting episode. Definitely check that out. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
Man, I'm all set.
In this episode, we're headed across the ocean to the small town of La Panne in the Grand Est region of France.
Oui.
And yes, we are.
Yeah.
I think this is our very first episode in France. It's a little scary because of the pronunciations. And, you know, we don't have a great track record of getting them correct in the United States.
Right.
And, you know, you add France in the mix and it adds a different level of complexity.
I'll try to help where I can from my experience when I was in La Paris.
Okay.
You know, when I was working in the Paris fashion business.
Okay, appreciate that. I will take all the help I can get.
Okay.
But this is a heartbreaking case.
It truly is.
To say the least. Yeah. I mean, it's a tragedy. On October 16th, 1984, a 4-year-old boy named Gregory Villemin was abducted and murdered in a case that I think, Gibbs, to say the least, has become a convoluted affair with multiple arrests, but no convictions. A lot of people feel as though the investigations have been botched. There's definitely been festering family drama, all surrounding a truly heinous crime committed because of what a lot of people believe is bitter jealousy of the boy's father. According to the Netflix documentary, Who Killed Little Gregory, the twisted resentments that would eventually lead up to the murder of Gregory started years before the murder itself, before the young boy was even born. Gregory's parents, Jean-Marie and Christine Villemin, were married in 1979, and soon after that moved into a nice house that they had built for them in the uptown area of La Palme. Most, if not all, of the extended Villemin clan lived in or around La Palme as well. They were a working class family, and Jean-Marie, with his well-paying job as a foreman in a local factory, was the one member of the family who made it out of this working class life. Although he was hardly a rich man, from the point of view of the rest of his family, his middle class life seemed picture perfect. He had a beautiful wife, a beautiful house, a well-paying job, and once Gregory was born, a strong, healthy child who he and Christine clearly loved and adored. Many family members were extremely jealous. Jealousy that would build and build over the years and lead to falling outs between Jean-Marie and other family members, specifically his cousin Bernard LaRoche and his brother Michael Villemin. In 1981, not long after Jean-Marie received a promotion at work, Jean-Marie and Christine, as well as Jean-Marie's parents, started receiving disturbing letters and chilling phone calls from a person who would come to be known as Le Corbeau, or the Crow, or the Raven. In France, Le Corbeau is a term for an anonymous letter writer that comes from the 1943 film of the same name about someone using anonymous letters to threaten and terrorize others with libelous information. Jean-Marie and Christine received several letters and hundreds of calls from the Crow, sometimes up to 27 calls a day.
That's crazy. 27 calls a day?
Well, you know me. If I get one call from someone that is unwanted, unwarranted,
yeah,
that's one too many.
Exactly.
So 27, I'm in total spin out mode where I'm trying to figure out how to stop these calls. There's no doubt. So we've seen this term, Gibbs, Le Corbeau, translated as both the Crow and Raven. I think for consistency's sake, we're just going to go with the Crow throughout this episode. Now back to the phone calls. While some calls would be silent, others were childish insults. There was name calling, and others were direct threats to Jean-Marie and his family. The Crow threatened to burn down the house and sent a letter saying, "I'll have all your hides." The Crow claimed that a trap was set up for Christine and that it was lucky she stayed in the house or I would have raped her. The Crow told Jean-Marie's father, Albert, to hang himself and eventually escalated to threats against little Gregory, telling Jean-Marie, "I can see him with my binoculars. Don't let him wander. One day you will find him strangled." Okay, we talked about calls and I was kind of light-hearted about it, saying I don't like phone calls and I would be upset.
Right.
But once you get into the seriousness, how heinous these calls are, you're at a different level. This is not a telemarketer or multiple telemarketers who are bothering you while you're trying to eat dinner.
It's not a prank call.
No.
This is turning into something very serious.
Yes, this is someone who is threatening you, threatening members of your family, threatening to rape your wife.
Yeah.
And ultimately saying that your little boy is going to be strangled.
If I get my hands on him, keep an eye on him.
The Crow was also extremely aware of secrets and tensions going on in the extended Villemin family, of which there were many, and often cryptically referred to these tensions in calls and letters, saying things like, do you want your father-in-law to commit suicide? Do you want your father-in-law to be blamed for this? One exchange between the Crow and Jean-Marie went as follows. The Crow said, there's another bastard, and I might be the only one who knows who it is. Jean-Marie said, and who is it? Tell me. The Crow said, your mother knows it too. Jean-Marie asked who. The Crow said, she's scared of the truth. You too will be put aside. Now, this call referred to one of the family's biggest scandals, namely that Jean-Marie's mother, Monique, had gotten pregnant outside of wedlock and passed off the resulting child, Jackie, as her husband Albert's child for years before the truth came out. So we've got some really nasty, threatening calls. And now there's a call talking about one of the family's biggest secrets.
Yeah.
Involving a scandal. What does that say to you, Gibbs?
Well, I want to know how they know that secret.
Well, that's kind of where I was headed, what I was going with. Obviously, they do know about it. So the question is how close to the family are they?
Right.
Or did they get it from someone in the family? They've got to know someone or have had a method to get that information.
Exactly. Yeah. Either they're in it or they're very, very tight.
Naturally, the letters and calls from the Crow ended up pitting family members against each other, pretty much all of them, suspecting that the other could be the Crow, or that everybody, except for me, if I'm in the family, was at least feeding this person information. It didn't help that the Crow often referred to Jean-Marie as Le Chef, or the boss, in a taunting or sarcastic manner, bringing to mind how many family members were jealous of his success. Finally, in May 1983, the Vilmas received a letter from the Crow stating that the harassment and letter writing was going to stop. You'll never know who I am, but you'll wonder. And the Crow signed it in French, but the English translation is somewhere along the lines of, goodbye, my dear idiots, or goodbye, my dear assholes, one or the other. Neither one very flattering.
No, but direct.
But direct and to the point. For a year and a half, Gibbs, the family heard nothing else from the Crow. And I think they were very relieved. Who wouldn't be, right? You've gone through quite a bit of torment at the hands of this person, and now all of a sudden it has stopped. So naturally, what happens?
Well, you're going to get a whole lot more relaxed for sure. And you're going to let your guard down.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what happened. You have this family kind of returning to some type of normalcy after a couple of years of being terrorized by this person. Unfortunately, this brief period of respite was broken in the most tragic manner possible. On October 16th, 1984, Christine picked Gregory up from daycare and returned to the house. They got home just before 5 p.m. and she let Gregory play outside while she was doing some ironing. But when she went to bring him back in, he was nowhere to be seen. At first, she believed that, okay, he had just wandered off, maybe with some friends who lived nearby. So she went and she checked with these friends, but none of them had seen him either. Panic set in. She called the police, who immediately began searching for the young boy. While police were searching for Gregory, Jean-Marie's brother, Michael, picked up a phone call from the Crow. who stated, "I killed the boss's son. I threw him in the Villemin River. I got my revenge on the boss. His mother is looking for him, but she'll never find him." Gibbs, I can't imagine, first of all, your child goes missing.
Sure.
But then secondly, you get a message from someone claiming to have killed this boy,
right,
and thrown them in the river. I don't know how you just don't drop the phone and drop down into a crumpled heap, a mess.
I think most people would, right? I mean, the mom's freaking out. Where's my kid? Looking for her kid. And then the uncle gets the phone call that they killed Gregory. I mean, it's got to be devastating all the way across the board.
And I think you have to ask the question, how much would you put into this call? You don't want it to be true. Obviously, nobody would want it to be true. But how much do you actually put into it? Because unfortunately, at 9 p.m. that night, searchers found Gregory's body in the Villemin River about 4 kilometers or 2.5 miles away from his house. The boy was tied up with rope at his ankles and wrists with his wool hat pulled down over his face below his chin and tied there with rope. There were no other signs of violence on his body, leading investigators to believe he had been put into the river alive and that his cause of death was most likely drowning. So you and I, we talk about a lot of unsolved cases where parents lose children and they don't find out for a long period of time, or they never find out
right
what happened to their child. This story is a little different.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, they find out very quickly what happened to their 4-year-old son. It's not a good ending. Obviously, it's tragic. It's horrific. And then the next day, the parents received another letter that had been posted in the village of La Palme a day earlier at 5:15 p.m. And this was around the same time that Gregory had disappeared the day before. The letter read, "I hope the sorrow kills you, boss. Your money won't bring back your son. This is my revenge, you asshole."
It's a very angry person, upset about something.
Has got it out for this family.
Yeah.
And if the person is telling the truth, is willing to go to the ultimate length, to commit the ultimate sin, to get back at this family.
Yeah, I'm going to hurt you the best way that I can. I'm going to take away your child from you.
So you had the Crow claiming responsibility for the murder, and, given the Crow's knowledge of the internal family's affairs, which we talked about, it didn't take long for the local police to conclude that a member of the extended family was most likely involved in the murder of Gregory. There was also the possibility that there were multiple culprits or accomplices, an idea that would become a recurring theme in this case. We're going to see it time and time again. Through interviews with family members, police found that although some family members who had heard the Crow's voice described the voice as male, others believed it to be a woman's voice. This led police to believe that there could be 2 or more Crows, and thus 2 or more people involved in Gregory's murder. And Gibbs, you and I have watched the documentary on Netflix. Probably a lot of people have.
Yeah.
If you're one of the individuals that have watched it, then you heard the voice of the Crow because it's played on the documentary. The one thing I will say about it is that it didn't jump out at me and hit me in the face that it was either male or female. It was very tough to gauge, in my opinion.
Yeah, my opinion too.
The police began interviewing all 70 members of the Villemin family. They took handwriting samples from each of them in order to try to find out who the Crow was through a handwriting match. In the meantime, a photojournalist named Jean Kerr, who had taken it upon himself to investigate this case, paid a visit to Jean-Marie's aunt Louisette in hopes that he could squeeze some information out of her. While he was there, he found that Bernard Laroche, Jean-Marie's cousin, was staying with his aunt, which John Kerr found odd, as Bernard was a fully grown man with a wife and son, not to mention the fact that, he had a house of his own. When he asked Louisette why Bernard was staying with her, she merely answered, he's scared. They're scared. Jean Kerr relayed this information to Jean-Marie, who told the journalist the night before he had visited Louisette. Many members of the Villemin family had met up at Jean-Marie's mother's house, where Jean-Marie had told his family that if he found out who killed his son, he would kill them in the dead of the night. So, okay, maybe this explains why the cousin, Bernard, didn't feel safe staying at his own house after hearing that. Could have been a coincidence, or, maybe they were all scared because even if they didn't have something to do with it, they thought, okay, he's going to point the finger at somebody and he's going to act.
Something's going to happen to somebody soon. I'll go over here and hang out with Aunt Louisette.
And it's hard for me, Gibbs, to blame Jean-Marie in this situation. I can't honestly tell you that I would feel any differently. I don't think I would. I would hope that I wouldn't act on it, but I know that feeling would course through my veins.
Oh, same here.
If I figure out who this is, I'll kill him myself.
Yeah. Yeah, you want that revenge.
Not long after this incident, handwriting experts informed the police that Bernard's handwriting matched at least two of the crow's letters. Bernard was promptly arrested and brought in for questioning, as was his wife, Marie-Ange. The motive was thought to be quite simply jealousy, because although the cousins had been close growing up, apparently they had grown apart over the years, and Bernard was one of the family members who seemed the most resentful of his cousin Jean-Marie's success.
Yeah, he seemed pretty unhappy with his life compared to Jean-Marie's success, for sure. He did more like odd jobs around the town for family members. And I think he felt a lot of times the more successful side of the family cheated him out of his money for his labor, the things that he's done for him.
I got a family member like that as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I won't name names because I know my family listens to this podcast, so they'll be wondering who it might be. But this is a person who will often say, hey, come over. I'll give you X amount. I need a little bit of work done. You go over and do the work, and then it's kind of like, hey, thanks for doing that.
They forget that
there was mention of payment.
Yeah. And if you don't know who that person is, it's probably you.
It's probably you. Now, of course, Gibbs, Bernard, and his wife both maintained their innocence. And Bernard told police that his sister-in-law, Muriel Boll, could verify his alibi. He claimed she saw him arrive at his aunt's house that night. When police interviewed Muriel about this, however, it didn't take long for them to discover an inconsistency. Muriel said that when she arrived at Louisette's house, Bernard was already there. And after police confronted her about this contradiction, Muriel cracked almost instantly, confessing that Bernard had picked her up after school the day of the murder, drove to a village, went off and came back with a child, drove to another village, left again with the child, and came back alone. So no doubt, from the point of view of police, they believe she had witnessed Bernard kidnap and murder Gregory. On November 5th, 1984, Bernard was arrested. The thing that troubles me greatly about this whole situation is that I could never find, I don't, you didn't either because we talked about it,
right,
where police got confirmation from Muriel that the child she saw with Bernard was Gregory Villemin.
Right.
And I just could never understand. Obviously, she knew Gregory. She knew what Gregory looked like. So why was there no confirmation? Or if there was, we couldn't find it.
Yeah. Why wasn't it talked about?
So Gibbs, it's normally at this point of the story where things are starting to wrap up, right? The murderer has been arrested and is getting ready to face the consequences of his actions. But we've just reached the first of what would be several major blunders by the authorities in this case. Judge Lambert was the magistrate assigned to this case. In France, a magistrate is essentially an investigative judge, as the name would imply, a judge who carries out pretrial investigations and makes recommendations for the prosecution. So Judge Lambert had quite a bit of power. Gibbs, he also had a lot of responsibility.
And he sure did.
When it came to the investigation of Gregory's death. But when Judge Lambert was informed of Muriel's testimony pinning the murder on Bernard, rather than jumping into action, he told the police that it was a Friday and he was going away for the weekend. He would get back to the case on Monday. This meant that Muriel was sent back to her family, who knew that she had just condemned her brother-in-law to jail for Gregory's murder.
Yeah, I have a problem with that. It's like you have this teenage girl that finally has told you what she believed happened that day. Your whole case depends on her testimony. And you're like, hey, it's the weekend. Guys, I gotta head into this other town. I'm going away for a little bit. I need to get my time away from here. So I'll be back on Monday. Yeah, just send her back to her home. Things will be all right. Just tell her, hey, when she gets there, don't say anything. Don't talk about anything we talked about. It's just between you and us, okay? Everything will be okay. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no way is her entire family going to be upset that she's trying to put her brother-in-law in jail. But man, when the weekend comes and you got fishing to do, you got to do what you got to do.
That clock says 5 o'clock. I'm gone.
Well, it's 5 o'clock somewhere. Now, what exactly happened over that weekend? I don't know that the public will ever know for sure.
Running a business can be exhausting. Building your website shouldn't be. With Wix, you can express your ideas, give direction, then leave the heavy lifting to AI. From site creation to branded content and images. Have fun with the details. Customize what you want the way you want. And manage your whole business from a centralized dashboard with expert AI tools. Build, scale, and enjoy the incredible results. You can do it all yourself on Wix.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quests to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
Some in the town claim that Muriel was beaten, threatened, and left in the barn overnight as punishment for what she had done. Now, the family obviously denies that they tried to influence her in any way, but just 2 days later, Muriel recanted her testimony, stating that the police had coached her into implicating her brother-in-law. A hearing was held, and Bernard's alibi for the day of Gregory's murder was checked against 5 other witnesses and verified. So as a result of this, the defense filed a motion for release, and Bernard LaRoche was released from prison on February 4th, 1985. This was a blow to Jean-Marie, and I'm sure it was a blow to Christine as well. He fully believed that his cousin was the culprit, and of course he was furious about this, and he repeated the threat that he had made to his family and to the press, saying he intended to kill the person responsible for his son's death. So not good if you're the cousin and he believes it was you and you got let out on a technicality or whatever.
It's definitely not helping your case.
Gibbs, one thing I think is important to talk about is by this point, this case had become very heavily covered in the media. It was basically a media circus by this point. What had once been a quiet, ordinary town in a quiet, ordinary part of France was now crawling with journalists, photographers, and tragedy tourists who all wanted to see the place where poor Gregory had been murdered. And I think more intrusively, these people were insistent on prying into the lives of the family members. Some of these people thought, okay, we can solve the murder ourselves.
Yeah.
And so we're going to do all the digging that we can. And I don't think that Judge Lambert helped this out whatsoever. In fact, I think he riled up some people, especially the press. I think he was happy to answer questions from reporters. He held impromptu press conferences. There's no doubt from the research, Gibbs, you would have to say that a lot of people don't have a very good opinion of this Judge Lambert, at least in his handling of this case.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I think that's very safe to say.
Well, and I also think he really enjoyed, as one should not, but he really seemed to enjoy the limelight that was placed on him.
And reporters are happy to give you that limelight if you're going to answer their questions and spill information that may or may not should have been public.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big question in this case.
Sure is.
So with Bernard LaRoche cleared, the press and investigators began searching for the next potential culprit. The target they started focusing on was Gregory's mother, Christine Villemin. The reasons that suspicion fell on Christine range from the totally ridiculous to the somewhat understandable. Like many parents of murdered children before and after her, Christine had begun to fall victim to the scrutiny of the press. They criticized her for every little thing she did. You know, she wore nice clothes. Then to them and in their reporting, she didn't look like the grieving mother that they thought she should look like.
Which is, I think, wrong. I mean, how can you judge somebody about how they are wearing or what they are wearing while they grieve? But they certainly did, and so did some of the detectives.
And unfortunately, you see this in a lot of cases. The family members kind of get put on trial. They get scrutinized by the press, and a lot of times they're hammered, Gibbs, in a very negative way. This on top of the fact that they're still trying to grieve and deal with the death of their 4-year-old child. You know, say what you want about the press. I mean, they serve their role, but they can also go too far, in my opinion. Some of them can be monstrous. And I think if you look at some publications, they don't have the same set of ethics as maybe others do.
Right.
You have the tabloids, you have the rags, and you have some of these papers that they're willing to print just about anything, the salacious, the better, whether it damages or hurts a grieving family or not.
Sure, if it's a good story, if it sells copy, maybe it persuades the public, which in turn influences the police.
And Gibbs, the press really crucified Christine after she got pregnant again in early 1985. This led to widespread criticism of Christine and Jean-Marie for what the media thought was them replacing Gregory too soon. Even Christine's hysterical grief at the funeral, which was filmed by all of these journalists for the world to see, it wasn't enough to sway the opinion of some people who had become convinced that she could be the culprit. One national police officer said that sometimes the only person crying at a funeral is the guilty one. Now, I understand crocodile tears.
Yeah.
And you and I have talked about that on a number of unsolved episodes.
Sure.
But I sure as hell don't agree with the statement that sometimes the only person crying at a 4-year-old boy's funeral is the culprit.
Yeah.
You can't tell me that there would be a dry eye for anyone in attendance. I struggle to believe that.
Yeah. And when you look at that video, of course she's wailing. But like you said, she's the mom of a 4-year-old. And she passes out and they have to, pick her up and carry her away from the wake. But what else is she going to do? I mean, she's the mom.
It's grief like very few of us have ever experienced, and none of us ever want to. Man, to say that makes her look like her son's killer, that's brutal.
Right.
Now, is it out of the realm of possibility? No, because I think at this point, as far as I know, not everybody's been ruled out, and most likely almost everybody in the family is a suspect. But
Sure.
To really hammer that home through the media, I just think it's dirty. I think it's nasty. Judge Lambert also became suspicious of Christine. Many on the side of Jean-Marie and Christine claimed that there were a whole bunch of people in Judge Lambert's ear kind of talking him in to believing that Christine was involved. And I'm sure it didn't hurt that the media had really kind of swayed public opinion against her. Several local women came forward to report that they had seen Christine mail a letter at the post office just before 5 p.m. on the day that Gregory was murdered, basically implying that it could have been the letter from the Crow that arrived the day after Gregory was killed. But Christine insisted that she had been to the post office the day before the murder and that she had merely sent a mail order catalog form, which the police were able to verify. On top of that, if she had indeed sent the Crow's letter at the time the witnesses indicated, that means she would have sent the letter claiming responsibility for Gregory's murder before it even happened.
Yeah, which means she would have to know for sure that next day it'd be over. There would be no hiccups, no anything that would cause a problem with that occurring. It's a pretty hard guarantee.
A piece of cord matching what was used to tie Gregory's hands and ankles was also found inside the parents' home. But their lawyer claimed that this type of cord is extremely common in the region, and there was even some speculation later that a police officer had planted the cord there to strengthen the case against Christine. But it seemed, Gibbs, as though Judge Lambert was all in on Christine. He demanded handwriting samples from her because she had initially been exempted from the handwriting samples that were taken early on in the case, which I don't understand that either. I feel as though
test them all.
Yeah. Right? Test everybody you can. Start with the family, rule them out.
Yeah.
Why would you not want to get handwriting samples from them? On March 26, 1985, handwriting experts came back and stated that the handwriting on the Crow's letters matched Christine's handwriting. And I guess she heard this on the news. While she was riding in the car with her husband, Jean-Marie, Christine was so distressed that she had a hemorrhage and had to be hospitalized. She was 2 to 3 months pregnant at the time. Now, the handwriting match wasn't enough to arrest Christine and charge her with her son's murder. But what it did do is pretty much put most of the country into the mindset that they were now convinced that Christine was guilty.
Yeah. That's all they needed was that. Aha. See, we told you. We knew something had to be up with her.
And Judge Lambert was definitely convinced. Now, one person that wasn't convinced was Jean-Marie. And I get that. You know your wife, you're going to stand by your wife. Not to mention the fact that he was all in on his cousin Bernard's guilt. He still believed that.
Sure.
And I think he got to a point, Gibbs, where I don't know if you want to call it his breaking point. He broke, but it was something like that. He kind of snapped.
Yeah, I can get that, though. You know, I mean, the guy that you believe killed your boy is out, and now everybody's attacking your wife, the mother of your boy. Yeah, that's enough to do it.
Because on March 29th, 1985, Jean-Marie took his shotgun and went to Bernard's house. He confronted him at the front door. Bernard's wife claimed that Bernard tried to talk Jean-Marie down, repeating that he hadn't killed Gregory, and that Jean-Marie told Bernard he wanted to ask him something about Michael, Jean-Marie's brother, and Bernard told Jean-Marie to put down the gun and come inside, but Jean-Marie shot and killed him. According to Jean-Marie's own words, he had only wanted to talk to Bernard, but Bernard had mocked him, saying he had it coming. After killing his cousin, Jean-Marie turned himself in right away. So, when I said breaking point, he snapped, it does seem like that. And for the reasons that you pointed out, not excusing it, but it does seem like it was building, and it got to the point where he lost it.
Yeah.
But you can imagine what this did to the public, what it did to the authorities. Jean-Marie's in jail. Everyone pretty much already thought that Christine was somehow guilty. So him going to jail for murder just kind of adds another layer to it. But the one thing that Judge Lambert didn't have, the one thing he needed, was motive. He couldn't figure out what Christine's motive would have been for killing Gregory.
Right.
And then a journalist invited Marguerite Duras, a celebrated author at the time, to Le Pont to investigate and give her opinion on the case. Marguerite's involvement transformed this case from what was an already messy family affair to an Agatha Christie-like crime drama starring Christine Villemin as the villain. In an infamous article that she wrote following her visit to Le Pont, she pinned the crime on Christine. She portrayed her as a tragic figure, fed up with the trappings of motherhood, abused by her husband, and said that she killed Gregory as some sort of revenge against the injustices that she was suffering, but also as revenge for mothers everywhere.
Yeah.
That's what this woman wrote. Now, I think a lot of people saw this as, okay, this is a journalist, spinning a tale. The press picked it up and ran with it as though it was a fact.
Right.
That this is what happened and this is why she did it. And so Judge Lambert finally had his motive. In early July 1985, he issued the warrant for Christine's arrest. She was about 6 months pregnant at the time with twins. And sadly, at some point, she lost one of the twins she had been carrying.
Yeah. Probably all the stress.
Yeah, it's a lot of stress. But Christine wouldn't be in prison long. Almost immediately after her arrest, she began a hunger strike, as did her husband, in solidarity. Christine appealed her case and was released about 11 days later. A few months after that, after she had given birth to a son named Julian, it was decided that her case would move forward to trial. And after hearing the news, Christine tried to take her life by taking an overdose of the tranquilizers she had been prescribed, but she lived. And her case continued to move through the court system over the next few years. In 1987, the Court of Cassation, the highest court in France for matters regarding civil and criminal matters in the judicial system, and the Supreme Court of Appeal for all such cases, ruled that the case as it stood was not fit to be tried in criminal court, and Judge Lambert was removed from the case. Now, Christine wasn't completely cleared of all charges until 1993. But after the 1987 ruling, her case was essentially restarted and a new magistrate was assigned. So I think just based off of that, it kind of tells you what the highest court thought of the actions of Judge Lambert.
Right.
And it's been echoed by, pundits and people that have followed this case. They just don't feel as though he did a very good job. I don't know how else to say it.
I think some people thought maybe he was a little too green for the case too, right? He was at that time a younger judge and didn't really have all that experience that one would need in a murder case.
The new magistrate, Judge Simon, ordered an in-depth reenactment of the crime. This reenactment found that had Gregory been thrown into the river alive and awake around 5:30 p.m., as was originally thought, there would almost certainly be marks of some kind on his body because the river was full of branches and debris, and Gregory naturally would have struggled against his bindings.
Yeah, I agree. If you're tossed into that water, why wouldn't you move your legs and try to move your arms? And, it's a turbulent river, so you would be banging into something, but he didn't have those markings on his body.
Yeah, curious.
Yeah.
So this led investigators to a new hypothesis that Gregory had been thrown into the water much later than originally thought, and that he had been sedated using a vial of insulin that had been found near where they believed his body was placed into the river. Judge Simon also began to heavily suspect that there were multiple crows and multiple collaborators in this crime, one possibly to abduct the boy, one to sedate him, one or more to keep watch, and so on and so on. So he's bringing in all kinds of people into this abduction and murder. He also started to investigate Bernard LaRoche's involvement and Muriel Boll again. I think he kept it much quieter than Judge Lambert did. He kind of kept it all on the hush-hush. But he interviewed Muriel for over 5 hours. But she didn't change her position. She continued to say that the police coerced her original confession, and she and her brother-in-law had nothing to do with Gregory's murder. 2 more years went by as Judge Simon continued to chip away at the case, but little progress was made. But then Judge Simon suffered a serious heart attack that put him in a coma, and when he woke up, Gibbs, he had no memory of the case whatsoever.
How bizarre.
Well, it's bizarre, but I don't know that it's all that strange. I think this happens to a lot of people who are in a coma, especially for an extended period of time. They definitely lose oftentimes some of the memories of things that happened before they went into the coma. I've definitely heard of that. But to your point, it's bizarre in the context of this already extremely bizarre case. It's like another element.
Yeah. What else can happen in this case? Yeah.
So they've had 2 investigating judges. Neither one has been successful at apprehending the killer or killers. I think a lot of people began to believe that, this was a case that was not going to be solved. And it kind of went cold. In 1993, the criminal trial of Jean-Marie for the killing of his cousin Bernard was held, a trial which was also seen as an unofficial trial for Gregory's murder, since that was Jean-Marie's entire motivation for killing Bernard. Many family members, including Jean-Marie's mother, Monique, and Muriel Boll, made appearances on the stand. Ultimately, the only verdict reached was that Jean-Marie was indeed guilty of killing Bernard LaRoche, but that whether correct or incorrect, he genuinely believed Bernard to be his son's killer. And I think this is something that highlights the differences in the judicial system.
Sure.
Especially with the United States and many other countries.
Right.
Because Jean-Marie was eligible for parole just a few weeks after the trial, when they factored in a reduced sentence and the time that he had already served, even though he was found guilty of murder.
Right. Yeah. I don't think that would happen here.
No, I mean, I can see a sentence reduction, and obviously people get credit for time already served. And I won't say it doesn't happen, that people don't get out of prison for murder in 8 years. I don't think it's the norm here. You know, we're very strict, and obviously we impose harsher penalties than a lot of places do in the world. But I think what's interesting about Jean-Marie and his trial is that it really seems as though they took into consideration the fact that he genuinely believed Bernard to be his son's killer.
Yeah.
Like that was a component. If they had not found that to be true, maybe he doesn't get out. It seems like that was taken into consideration. Jean-Marie and Christine requested that the case be looked at again in 2000. They wanted the latest in DNA technology to be used to test the DNA found on the stamps from the letters sent by the Crow. But the testing came back inconclusive. Further testing was also done on the rope, the letters, and Gregory's clothes and shoes. But it too all came back inconclusive. In 2017, Gregory's case heated up again with the arrest of Jacqueline and Marcel Jacob, Jean-Marie's aunt and uncle, Jeanette Villemin, the wife of Jean-Marie's brother Michael, who by this point had passed away, and Muriel Bolt. Jean-Marie's mother Monique was also questioned, although she was not arrested. These arrests were due to the handwriting analysis of the Crow's letters, which found that Jacqueline could have been the author of several of the letters. The original magistrate, Judge Lambert, took his own life following the 2017 arrests, leaving behind a note in which he said he still believed that Christine Villemin was the murderer, but that he felt immense pressure as a result of the case being reopened, and he refused to play the role of a scapegoat.
That's pretty big.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a large number of arrests out of one family.
And I have to wonder, whoever's doing the handwriting analysis, I just don't know how they keep tagging different individuals. I mean, originally, Bernard, his handwriting matched 2 of the Crow's letters. And then they arrest Christine and say her handwriting matches some of the letters. Now they have 5 family members' handwriting matching the letters. So I don't know.
Yeah, you know, I've been talking about this handwriting analysis. Maybe I was talking with Morph on criminology about it. It's not like DNA.
Yeah.
It's not like a fingerprint. Well, it's like a fingerprint was back in the day when you had to look at it through a magnifying glass and compare it to something else. There's a level of subjectivity to it. Now, some people are great at it. They're experts and all that, but maybe some people aren't as good, and what they see is not always the truth. And then this whole thing with Judge Lambert, you know, obviously I'm sure he didn't look good. And we've kind of mentioned it. A lot of people feel as though he didn't do a very good job, but it must have been extremely rough on him, you know, to the point where he ended his life and gave the reasoning for it as he still believed Christine was the murderer, and they had arrested these other people, and he wasn't going to be the scapegoat anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I know he took a lot of hits. He wrote a book at one point about the case, went on some talk show, and they just ripped him apart, basically saying, you should have never been a judge. You did more damage to this case than you did help it.
Wow.
Yeah. And he sat there and
I
took
didn't see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, stuff like that wears on someone.
Yeah.
And, you know, unless you're in that situation, you don't know how bad it is. But for some people, it can be very tough to live with.
Yeah.
I think the problem is nothing ever came from all these arrests, and all 4 were eventually released without ever being brought to trial. There have been no further arrests because the handwriting on the letters has been linked to so many different family members. I think, Gibbs, it's widely believed that Gregory's death was the result of some combination of these extended family members conspiring together, like we talked about, fueled by hatred and jealousy of Jean-Marie because he was doing better than they were, and maybe some other unknown family drama. They had some secrets. We know that. They had some scandals. Maybe they had some that we don't know about. I think what is extremely tough, and I don't want to lose sight, right, of the fact that a 4-year-old child lost his life, but it's really hard to stomach. On top of that one or several family members could have participated in the murder of Gregory.
Yeah.
In order to punish his father. For what? For being successful? For rubbing their face in? I don't know.
Right.
I don't know what all some of these people thought. And again, let me reiterate, I think this is what most people believe. It's not proven, but when you go out on forums and you look at comments posted to articles and things like that, the general sentiment that I got was that a lot of people believe that someone or multiple people in that family were somehow responsible for Gregory's death.
Yeah. All because of jealousy, seems like. I just don't understand that.
Yeah. I mean, if they were involved, that seems to be the most popular motive. And this is a case in France that is still extremely popular. I mean, that's a strange word to use. I don't know what other word I would use, though. There definitely remains hope that the crow or crows will one day be uncovered. And I go back to the handwriting. I'm still kind of confused,
right? Like
you are, that so many different people can be linked to this handwriting, and it turns out that at the very least, the evidence doesn't prove that they killed Gregory.
Right.
But you would think there would be some mechanism, because these letters were threatening. They were criminal. So if they could prove that the handwriting was this person or that person, you would think charges could be brought just for writing the letter alone.
Yes.
Or letters.
Yeah. And I think they need to go back and look at the insulin that they found on the side of the river where they thought the body went in at, and find out who that belonged to. And does it tie back to anybody in the family or whoever it ties back to? Because there was a good chance it was used to sedate him.
Yeah, I think that's been the police theory for some time now. Gibbs, as we wrap up this case, I don't want to keep saying how tragic it is. Everybody knows that. What I will say is this absolutely seems like a solvable case to me. They have what appears to be quite a bit of evidence between the letters, the calls. We haven't even talked about, is there a mechanism for going back and trying to figure out where those calls came from? Probably not now.
Right.
But that's one of the problems I have is, okay, they have the clothes. They have a lot of things to test for DNA. Some of that has come back as inconclusive. I think there's a lot of things that maybe we don't know what's been tested or what avenues police have gone down. I think there's still some unknown in this case as it relates to the investigation. But you and I have covered a lot of cases where, by the time we were done, I was left feeling as though this case is going to be very hard to solve.
Yeah.
I don't feel that way here. I feel that this is a solvable case. I do think there have been missteps along the way, and that hurts a case every time it happens because you focus in on one suspect to the detriment of investigating other people. So I don't know. I know there's a lot of people that want to see this one wrapped up.
Oh, for sure.
I know that.
Yeah. And even if it was Bernard, I think they want to see the evidence behind it.
Sure. People like conclusion.
Yes.
And this is a high profile case, especially in France. I mean, this is one of their highest profile cases. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And it's getting a lot of traction here,
right,
because of the documentary. I don't know how many people had heard of it before then. I don't know how many of our listeners will know that much about it, because I do think some people struggle with the foreign documentaries.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not everybody's cup of tea.
Right. Like you said, you got to really pay attention when you're watching it. So is it something you really want to watch or not?
But people might watch it now based on, some of the things that we've talked about.
Sure.
But that's it for our case on Gregory Villemin. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. My name is Wanda Thompson, and I am a TCAT fan. I am so excited that I just finished the last episode of 2019, but I have to say it is April 2nd, 2021. So I'm making my way through, but in my excitement, I had to call and say how much I love the show. I am Team Gibby all the way, like you too, Mike, but sorry, you give Gibby such a hard time. I hope by the time I make it to 2021 that you have eased up on Gibby. Anyway, just wanted to say how much of a fan I am. I'm super nervous. I hope I'm not rambling. But anyway, I hope by the time I make it to, again, 2021, I'll be able to hear my voice message and just be so excited. Anyway, keep your own time ticking, and love you guys. Keep up the great work. Bye.
So, Gibbs, I'll say two things. First of all, she will hear her voice message.
Yeah.
By the time she gets to this episode.
She should.
And second of all, I think what she'll learn as she gets caught up, as she gets into the current episodes, is what our relationship is really like.
Yes.
Because I think that comes out
absolutely.
over the years.
Yeah.
In the beginning, people were really on me about, why are you so tough on Gibby? And I think people that have been with us through the whole thing understand that, it's kind of our relationship, and we go back and forth. And you're also,
I give
it back much more off the air.
Yeah.
And you've started sometimes on the air, but you're a little bit different off.
Hey, Mike and Gibby. This is Tyler from Springfield, Illinois. I'm calling again. Yes, I'm at work again. Hopefully my boss doesn't see. Just kidding. But I was listening to the recent episode 227, Charles Starkweather, and I gotta say I appreciate all the De Niro references. He's my favorite actor of all time. I got a question for both of you. Which is the better film, The Godfather or The Goodfellas? And if you pick The Godfather, it could be part 1 or part 2. My favorite is part 2, Godfather, even though part 1's better in my opinion. I don't know. I can't decide. I'm indecisive. I'm gonna go with part 1 because of James Caan. He's one of my favorites, but I want to know what you guys think. Keep your own time taking, guys. Thanks.
So obviously this is probably more meant for TCAT. I was having a hard time finding unsolved voicemails, and I thought this was an interesting one. It's a very tough question. Now,
well, clearly it was tough for him to answer.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
I love Goodfellas. Love it. Have seen it so many times. But, and I think I've told you this before, Godfather is one of my all-time favorites. And like him, I have a real hard time picking between 1 and 2.
Yeah. 1
has James Caan, but 2 has De Niro.
Right.
As a young Don.
Right.
And there's it's just really, both of them are excellent. It's hard to pick between, now I can pick between those and 3, even though
that's a no-brainer.
I'll watch 3, but 1 and 2 are just amazing.
Yeah, they really are.
I think the difference between the two films, or The Godfather and Goodfellas is kind of, good versus bad. Good triumphs in the end.
Yeah.
Good does not triumph in the end in Godfather.
No.
There's no scene where all the Corleones get put into jail. It just doesn't happen. Now people die.
Sure.
But that's kind of the difference between the two movies. A lot of mob movies, in the end, the mob members either die or they all get put in jail, which is kind of what happens in Goodfellas.
Right.
I know I was rambling there, but still love it.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Mike and Gibby. This is Christina, and I live in the Bay Area in California. I actually live in like a small town, and so whenever you guys talk about small towns and like stories related to small towns, I always think about the one I live in. And we haven't really had a lot of crime, but we have had one case where this guy murdered a kid who was actually friends with one of my friend's younger brothers. So kind of one of those like connection things. But I was really calling to tell you guys the other day, I was listening to one of you guys' podcasts, and it was, I can't remember which one it was, but it was about this like guy shooting through a window pretty much. And when he shot through the window, he like someone was driving or something. But anyways, I was listening to that, and while I was listening to it, there was a man on the side of the road holding a liquor bottle, and he started banging on my window because I was at like an intersection, so I stopped. And it scared the you-know-what out of me because I was listening to the podcast. I was like all in, you know. He was just asking for money, but I got so scared. But anyways, this is like the longest voicemail ever. I love you guys. I love your podcast. And yeah, keep your own time ticking.
All right. We love you too. Those can be scary. You know, that's happened to me before, watching a scary movie, and the doorbell rings on a scary movie, and like there, you know, you open the door and the killer's there, and all of a sudden somebody rings your doorbell.
Right.
That's scary.
Or I know you're watching that one movie with the phone rings, because I know it. Then I call you and I go,
he's in the house.
Yeah.
The killer's in the house. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.